Thick fog clung to the canopy, droplets sliding off massive leaves into the murky river below. Every step was swallowed by the wet, rotting carpet of the jungle floor. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, decay, and something else. Fear. Somewhere ahead, a distant echo of gunfire rattled through the trees. Sharp and fragmented, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, soldiers moved cautiously, machetes slicing through dense vines, eyes darting for shadows that could be friend or foe. The canopy above swallowed the sunlight, leaving them in a perpetual green twilight. Somewhere in the distance, a shout cut through the monotony, quickly smothered by the jungle's vastness. Men stumbled, their boots sinking into mud, packs dragging, hearts pounding. Not just from exertion, but from the knowledge that men had entered this wilderness and never returned. Birds cried and vanished into the undergrowth. Insects hummed like a mechanical drone, and every sound seemed amplified. Warning of danger unseen. Somewhere in this living labyrinth, the battle was already being decided. Not by artillery, but by the forest itself. By 1942, the world was engulfed in war on a scale never seen before. While Europe and the Pacific burned under the weight of armies and navies, another theater unfolded quietly in the shadows of the Amazon. Here, the Axis powers sought to exploit untapped resources and secure supply routes through South America, aiming to influence neutral nations and disrupt Allied logistics. The dense jungle, vast rivers, and near impenetrable terrain presented both a challenge and an opportunity. For the Allies, particularly Brazil, the stakes were clear: protect sovereignty, prevent Axis infiltration, and secure a critical front that, though remote, could sway regional balance. Intelligence reports spoke of German agents moving through river networks, recruiting local sympathizers, and plotting sabotage against key supply lines. The Allied command, aware of these threats, began assembling specialized units trained for jungle warfare. Men who could endure heat, disease, and the constant threat of ambush. Every mission carried a quiet intensity. The forest was as lethal as any trained soldier, and every decision could mean life or disappearance. The soldiers sent into the Amazon were a unique blend. Hardened men accustomed to the wilderness, engineers familiar with riverine operations, and scouts capable of reading subtle signs in a sea of green. Their objective was to patrol, intercept Axis operatives, and secure critical installations. But the environment was the true enemy. Rain fell without warning, turning trails into rivers of mud, while tropical diseases crept silently, claiming more men than bullets ever could. Local tribes provided guidance, or sometimes misinformation, making alliances both vital and fragile. Supply lines stretched for hundreds of kilometers, leaving units isolated, cut off from reinforcements. Every day was a test of endurance, skill, and sheer will. In this theater, bravery meant more than courage. It demanded adaptability, cunning, and the acceptance that the jungle might consume even the best prepared soldier. The Amazon was a living fortress, a vast expanse of rivers, swamps, and towering trees that could swallow a man whole. For the soldiers, navigation was a constant challenge. Maps were outdated or incomplete. Compasses often faltered beneath the dense canopy, and even the smallest stream could become an insurmountable barrier after days of rain. They relied on canoes, rafts, and crude bridges, moving silently to avoid detection by Axis operatives who knew the terrain intimately. These operatives were often embedded with local networks, blending seamlessly into villages or floating along the rivers in inconspicuous boats. The danger was not just in direct confrontation, but in ambushes, poison traps, and the relentless fatigue that the jungle imposed. Heat and humidity drained strength, while leeches, Insects and venomous snakes lurked at every step. Sleep was a luxury, and every night brought the echo of distant voices or the rustle of unseen movement, keeping men awake and anxious. Communication with headquarters was precarious at best. Radio signals rarely penetrated the thick foliage, and supply drops were often misdirected, leaving men without food, medicine, or ammunition. For days, units had to improvise, relying on hunting, foraging, and local knowledge. Leadership was tested continuously, as commanding officers balanced aggressive patrols with the preservation of life, knowing that one wrong decision could condemn men to the jungle's vast silence. Yet, despite the ever-present dangers, these soldiers pressed forward. Each mission, each patrol, carried a weight beyond the immediate objective. It was about survival, honor, and the hope that their actions, though hidden deep within the rainforest, would ripple outward, contributing to the larger struggle unfolding across continents. In the heart of the Amazon, war was not only fought with bullets and grenades, but with endurance, wit, and an unyielding will to persist. The men who entered the Amazon carried more than rifles. They carried fear, hope, and the memories of lives left behind. The heat pressed against their skin, sweat stinging eyes and clinging to uniforms that were never dry. Hunger gnawed quietly beneath the noise of distant gunfire. Yet the jungle demanded constant vigilance. Every snapping branch, every flutter of wings could signal an enemy or be nothing at all. But the mind could not afford to ignore it. Either camaraderie became a lifeline. A shared glance, a steadying hand on a shoulder, the quiet reassurance that someone else was still there. Letters from home were read and reread, fragile connections to a world far beyond the dense greenery. In these moments, the jungle seemed infinite. Each step forward a small victory against exhaustion, disease, and the unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Tactically, the Amazon transformed the rules of engagement. Traditional formations were impossible. Soldiers moved in small, flexible units, constantly adjusting to the terrain. Ambushes were not only expected, they were inevitable. River crossings became perilous gambles, every current and eddy a potential trap. Scouts marked hidden paths and shallow waters, while sentries listened to the subtle rhythms of the forest, detecting movements invisible to the untrained eye. Communication was minimal, relying on signals, whispers, and prearranged signs. The enemy, often a ghost, disappeared as quickly as it appeared, leaving men uncertain if they had engaged or merely glimpsed a shadow. Survival required more than courage. It demanded strategy, patience, and a relentless awareness of the forest's moods. Weaponry and technology were both an advantage and a limitation. Standard rifles jammed under humidity and rain. Ammunition became a precious commodity. Engineers experimented with improvised traps, small explosives, and river-mounted defenses. While radio sets were delicate and often useless under the canopy, soldiers adapted, learning to silence weapons to avoid detection and to use the jungle itself as cover. Boats, machetes, and primitive signaling systems became extensions of their bodies, tools as vital as lungs or hands. Every innovation was a response to necessity, every adjustment a testament to human ingenuity against an environment designed to test every limit. From the enemy's perspective, the Amazon was both a shield and a weapon. Axis operatives, often trained in reconnaissance and sabotage, moved with an ease that belied the forest's dangers. They knew where patrols might falter, which river bends offered cover, and which villages provided supplies or information. Their presence was spectral, sometimes only felt in the whispered reports of locals, the sudden disappearance of men, or the careful dismantling of supply caches. Every encounter was a psychological battle, as much about intimidation and uncertainty as direct combat. For soldiers on the Allied side, this unseen adversary became an ever-present shadow, shaping decisions, instilling caution, and magnifying every risk into a potential fatality. Leadership in the Amazon demanded more than authority. It required intuition, adaptability, and moral clarity under relentless pressure. Commanders made decisions with incomplete information, balancing offensive objectives with the imperative to preserve life. One misjudgment could lead a unit into a hidden trap, or worse, allow the forest to claim them silently. Orders were precise, yet flexible, emphasizing initiative and situational awareness. Soldiers were trained to think independently, to act decisively when cut off from command, and to maintain discipline amid chaos. These qualities became as critical as marksmanship or physical endurance. The moral dimension was never far from the surface. The jungle's cruelty was impartial. Yet human choices determined who survived its trials. Decisions about leaving a wounded comrade, rationing food, or forcing a retreat weighed heavily on men accustomed to camaraderie and honor. Psychological strain intensified with every patrol, every night spent listening to unseen movement, and every report of vanished colleagues. The Amazon was a teacher of humility and terror alike, shaping soldiers not only as combatants, but as humans confronting their own limitations. In this hidden theater of war, courage was measured not by heroics, but by perseverance. The quiet, relentless struggle to continue when the world had narrowed to mud, sweat, and shadows. The morning air was thick with mist, clinging to every branch and leaf like a veil. Soldiers moved in cautious formation, eyes scanning the dense undergrowth, ears attuned to the faintest disturbance. Ahead, a river bend revealed movement. Shapes gliding silently through the water, the enemy's presence undeniable yet elusive. Commands were whispered, almost swallowed by the forest, as men adjusted their positions, hearts hammering against ribs like tribal drums. Suddenly, a volley of gunfire shattered the quiet, bullets ripping through foliage, spraying mud and water as men ducked instinctively. The battle had erupted not with a charge, but with the sudden assertion of the forest itself, turning every tree, every shadow, into a potential threat. Amid the chaos, soldiers relied on training and instinct. Small units broke into improvisational squads, flanking unseen foes, returning fire with precise bursts. The river became both a barrier and a lifeline, guiding movement yet exposing each step to hidden rifles. Explosions echoed as booby traps, laid days before, detonated, throwing men to the ground, leaving only mud and echoes in their wake. Some disappeared entirely, swallowed by the jungle or carried off by the swift current, their fates unknown, their absence haunting every survivor. Sweat, blood, and rain mingled in the humid air, each breath a reminder of the thin line between survival and oblivion. In the thickest parts of the forest, visibility dropped to mere meters. Combat became a disorienting dance of shadows and noise, where hesitation could be fatal. Soldiers clung to the terrain itself for cover, reading every rustle, every movement, every unnatural sound. Leadership decisions were instantaneous. Which path to take, which position to hold, when to push forward or withdraw. The jungle, indifferent to strategy or valor, became the arbiter of life and death. Each soldier felt the weight of comrades lost moments before, yet pressed onward, driven by duty, fear, and the stubborn will to endure. Hours stretched like days. The battle ebbed and flowed, punctuated by sudden bursts of violence and long, tense silences. Men stumbled over roots, their uniforms soaked through, rifles slick with mud. In the distance, the river reflected fleeting glimpses of movement. Friend or foe, impossible to tell. Supply lines were cut, reinforcements delayed, and every shout risked revealing a position. Some units, advancing too aggressively, vanished into the green maze, leaving only traces of blood and broken gear behind. The jungle had claimed them, silently. As it had claimed so many before, leadership now teetered between desperation and ingenuity. Officers coordinated from makeshift positions, signaling across treacherous terrain, improvising strategies as paths closed and the enemy shifted with uncanny knowledge of the forest. Small victories, capturing a supply cache, securing a river crossing, were celebrated quietly, overshadowed by the cost of survival. Morale fluctuated with every skirmish. The psychological toll was palpable as men confronted not only the enemy, but the merciless environment itself. Fear, exhaustion, and adrenaline intertwined, shaping actions with stark clarity. As the sun dipped low, casting the jungle in deep shadows, the battle reached its grim turning point. The remaining men converged on a narrow clearing, a makeshift river outpost that would determine the outcome. Bullets whistled past, trees splintered under sporadic fire, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the canopy. Every decision, every movement, now carried irreversible consequences. When the smoke and rain cleared, the survivors were fewer, scarred, and profoundly changed. The jungle, vast and indifferent, had decided who would vanish and who would endure. And yet, even in this devastation, a flicker of determination remained. A resolve that the struggle, though hidden from history, was not without significance. When the gunfire finally faded, the silence felt heavier than the battle itself. The survivors moved cautiously, stepping over churned mud, splintered branches, and equipment half buried in the wet earth. The air still carried the metallic scent of spent cartridges and the sour humidity of the jungle after rain. Bodies were difficult to retrieve. Some were lost to the river's current, others to the thick undergrowth that had swallowed them without a trace. The immediate task was grim. Count the living, search for the missing, salvage whatever supplies had not been ruined by water or shrapnel. Even victories in this theater felt hollow, overshadowed by the absence of men who had walked beside them only hours before. Commanders sent urgent reports upriver, detailing casualties and the precarious position of the remaining forces. Medical teams worked with dwindling supplies, treating injuries complicated by infection, venom, and exhaustion. The wounded lay in makeshift shelters, their groans blending with the distant calls of wildlife reclaiming the forest. Those who could still fight stood guard, knowing the enemy might regroup or that the jungle itself could deliver new threats. Storms, flooding, or landslides, triggered by the relentless rain. The line between survival and collapse was razor thin, and every decision carried enormous weight. Information trickled in from scattered patrols. Enemy operatives had retreated deeper into the forest, their numbers diminished, but their networks intact. Villages once thought safe were found abandoned, hints of forced relocation or fear-driven flight. The sense of uncertainty deepened as Allied command realized the extent of the challenge. This was not a battlefield that could be won by brute force or superior firepower. This was a war of persistence, reconnaissance, and constant adaptation, where every inch of progress was contested by terrain as much as by enemy resistance. Over the following days and weeks, the consequences of the battle unfolded like a slow-moving shadow across the region. Reinforcements navigated the river systems, hauling medical supplies, food, and ammunition through waters still clouded with debris from the fighting. Survivors recounted fragmented memories, glimpses of enemies slipping between trees, the thunder of sudden ambushes, comrades disappearing in moments that still replayed in their minds. These testimonies became crucial for intelligence units, revealing how deeply Axis operatives had embedded themselves into remote communities and trading routes. Every detail helped piece together a picture of a hidden war shaping the stability of South America. The long-term toll on the soldiers was profound. Many returned with lingering illnesses, malaria, dengue, parasitic infections that would shadow them for years. Others carried invisible wounds, nightmares of twisting vines, rushing rivers, and voices calling out from the darkness. Yet their efforts had not been in vain. The battle, though obscure and overshadowed by larger fronts, disrupted key Axis operations and prevented vital sabotage attempts. The Allies secured crucial waterways, allowing supply routes to stabilize and strengthening Brazil's strategic cooperation. With the wider Allied effort, local populations felt the impact just as deeply. Some villages slowly returned to their lands, rebuilding homes and replanting crops. Others relocated permanently, choosing safety over familiarity. The scars of war blended with the natural cycles of the forest. Trees regrew, rivers cleared, animals returned. But the memory of what had transpired lived on in quiet stories passed from generation to generation. What had once been whispers about vanishing soldiers became part of a regional legacy, a testament to a conflict fought far from the world's spotlight, yet filled with immense courage and sacrifice. The jungle healed quickly, as if trying to erase the traces of war. But the memories carried by those who survived did not fade. They remembered the weight of the humid air, the echo of distant gunfire swallowed by trees, and the faces of comrades who vanished into the green silence. In the Amazon, the battlefield was not marked by trenches or ruins, but by stories. Quiet, fragile, and often untold. The soldiers who fought there understood that heroism was not always witnessed, and sacrifice did not always echo across continents. Some victories remained hidden beneath the canopy, known only to those who walked those shadowed paths. Yet their efforts shaped a region at a critical moment in history. They guarded waterways that fed nations, disrupted enemy plans that might have altered alliances, and held a frontier where few would ever know a war had been fought. Their courage lived not in grand monuments, but in the whispered memories of families, in the resilience of villages that rebuilt, and in the steady flow of rivers they once patrolled. The Amazon kept many secrets, but it also preserved a truth. Even in the most remote reaches of the world, the determination of ordinary soldiers could shift the course of a global struggle.